Hello everyone, it's me, Garrett of Oz. You're probably wondering why there is suddenly another video on the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, because we discussed it back in January. That was 9 months ago. And the reason for that is I felt a little like, as I went on through the books, for those of you new to the journey, I am working my way through all of the 40 Oz books that are considered canonical. My goal originally was one per month. I got a little derailed. I'm almost caught back up to one a month, but I've kind of taken that pressure off of myself and said, you know what? If I get one a month, great. If I get two a month, great. We're just going to kind of work our way through them. So if you're wondering why it's Wizard instead of TikTok, here you go. But I just felt like I had I fine-tuned my process, and I wanted to go back and give Wizard and Land their due. And I felt like, I really felt like I would be happier with my finished product. So I am going to archive the original videos, but, so if anyone ever wants them, I can pull them back out again. But for now, they're going to go away. I am not going to re-record my introduction, but I may. We'll see. So if you suddenly see an introduction show up, that's why. So don't anyone really be alarmed. The other thing I wanted to bring about was that I will be starting a blog. It's going to be tied through Blogger, and it's currently called theartofoz.blogspot.com. Quite literally, that's all there's going to be. I don't even think you're probably just going to get this page doesn't exist, because that's literally as far as I've gotten. But it's coming, and I will make sure to have that announcement shortly. And the blog is where I'm going to actually take the time to go into some of my more minute musings and ramblings, or as I ever so lovingly called it, vague postulating. Because that's what a lot of this is. It's just vague postulation on my part, with some genuine research behind it. But a lot of vague postulating. And there were other things through my collecting that I wanted to discuss that weren't worthy of a full video by any stretch of the imagination. Or even a full-length article for the Bomb Bugle. I mean, there's not things that it's, oh, well, I found this little interesting tidbit out, let me talk about it for a moment, and then we're done. Frankly, I don't think anyone but me is ever going to want a somewhat exhaustive overview of the Evelyn Kopelman Wizard editions, but there will be one. So, anyhow, without further ado, we're going to get back over into Wizard. This one may actually still be split into two parts, simply because Wizard is the big one. There's so much to talk about. So, there we go. So for this, when I read through it this time, I read it with the Books of Wonder original edition. I threw away my dust jacket very foolishly, probably somewhere around the time Titanic came out. Because I thought, oh, well, I want it to look like I have a first edition, because I'm in elementary school in Tiki, I'm going to fool everybody. So, I don't have the dust jacket anymore. This one was not my first edition of Wizard. That is going to be its own story later. But I did get it for Christmas in 1993. From my parents, as per the inscription. Merry Christmas, Garrett. This one is essentially a complete reproduction, facsimile, of the original edition. So you've got the color the same, you've got the line drawings that go throughout the edition, and I decided I wanted to do that. This is the only time I'm not reading a vintage edition. And I decided that because I wanted to try and experience the book the way someone would have in 1900. Closest way I can come, because dear God, I do not have $5,000 that I can just plunk down on a copy of the book, regardless of how bad a shape it's in. One day I will, though, and it'll be glorious. Anyhow, the other thing I did was I sort of charted how many days it took Dorothy to get from the tornado to the return to Kansas, because I was kind of curious. So, without further ado, we're going to launch in. The Wizard of Oz, as we all know, was written in 1899, first really published in 1900 by the George M. Hill Company in Chicago. Baum put up a lot of his own money. He signed over his royalties for Father Goose and prose so that they could publish this because he believed so strongly in it. It was an overly elaborate book, and it was an immediate success. It spawned, obviously, a 1902 stage musical, a 1910 silent film, a 1925 silent film, a 1932 semi-silent cartoon, and, of course, a little-known picture from 1939 starring Judy Garland, amongst many, many, many other things. So, one of the things that, and it started initially, before it was written, as stories that Baum told his sons and the neighborhood children. And his wife, Maud Gage, convinced him that he needed to put this into book form and actually publish it all the way through. And one of the reasons he did this was because he was not a fan of the traditional European fairy tale, as evidenced in the introduction, which I'll read now. Folklore, legends, myths, and fairy tales have followed childhood through the ages. For every healthy youngster has a wholesome and instinctive love for stories, fantastic, marvelous, and manifestly unreal. The winged fairies of Grimm and Andersen have brought more happiness to childish hearts than all other human creations. Yet the old-time fairy tale, having served for generations, may now be classed as historical in the children's libraries, for the time has come for a series of newer wonder tales, in which the stereotyped genie, dwarf, and fairy are eliminated, together with all the horrible and blood-curdling incident devised by their authors, to point a fearsome moral to each tale. Modern education includes morality, therefore the modern child seeks only entertainment in its wonder tales and gladly dispenses with all disagreeable incident. Having this thought in mind, the story of the wonderful Wizard of Oz was written solely to pleasure children of today. It aspires to being a modernized fairy tale in which the wonderment and joy are retained, and the heartaches and nightmares are left out. L. Frank Baum, Chicago, April 1900. There are those scholars out there who will try to read into it that Oz is a tale of populism, that Oz is a socio-political commentary, that it's this deep thing needing to be copiously analyzed and ripped to shreds, much like they have Alice in Wonderland. And the simple fact is, yes, there are always going to be some political overtones. There's going to be some sociological overtones. That's part of fiction. That's how these things go. But Baum makes it implicit that this is just a story to please children. And there you go. That's what it is. Baum makes a very clear point throughout the entire book that Dorothy is well fed. We never once have to question, did she eat? Unlike tales in the Brothers Grimm. You've got Hansel and Gretel, who are so starving they eat a gingerbread house. You've got all these stories of starving, hungry, poor children. The Little Match Girl in Andersen, which is a traumatizing tale. Dorothy is constantly eating. And even to that point, in Dinslow's illustrations of her... where's a good one? That's not it. Oh, this won't work in the tornado. She's fairly plump. She does not look like she's starving. She's a good, hearty stock Midwestern farm girl. She's been raised on beef. You know, she has eaten. She may be an orphan, but Aunt Em and Uncle Henry, at this juncture, we'll find out later, not so much, but at this juncture, they're pretty well off. Yes, they have a one-bedroom farmhouse, but that's really all they need. This is 1900, not 1939. We also, and the other thing that I find incredibly fascinating is Baum gives literally no description of Dorothy. really, in general, he doesn't give a lot of physical description to his human characters. He goes into great detail on the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, even really some of the Munchkins, and at least to their wardrobes, but to their other appearances, not so much. Which is nice because you can then interpret Dorothy however you wish. If you're, if you choose to see her as the little girl like Judy Garland, great. If you choose to see her differently, also great. Dorothy is sort of everyman to a degree without being, with her own backbone and spine. She's probably under the age of 10, not much older. Basing it off the illustrations, I would place her between 6 and 8 myself. Some people might skew her older. I certainly don't think she's 12. She's definitely 12 by the time she moves to Oz and Emerald City. But at this juncture, she's a fairly young girl. Who handles all of this very, very gracefully and very well. She just sort of, it's like, okay, there's magic, okay, there's talking scarecrows. This is all perfectly normal. Nothing shakes her, which is truly, especially at that time, it was the ideal, she was American. This is an American fairy tale. It's all part of how it's all working together. Because we all know the basic story, I'm not going to go into as much plot as I will in later books. If you don't know the plot of The Wizard of Oz, have you been living under a rock? It's, and the movie is great. And I can't knock the movie. I love the movie, obviously, by some of the stuff you see behind me. There you go. So we'll kind of just more go through things as I come across them. The witches are a balance of good and evil. The Good Witch of the North, who we later learn is named Tatty Poo, thank you, Ruth Plumley Thompson, states that when Dorothy is confused by the presence of witches and tells the Witch of the North that Kansas is civilized, she says, oh, well, that accounts for it. In civilized countries, I believe there are no witches left, nor wizards, nor sorceresses, nor magicians. But you see, the land of Oz has never been civilized, for we are cut off from all the rest of the world. Therefore, we still have witches and wizards among us. And I think it's interesting because really, in some ways, Oz is much more civilized. The Oz that you see in Wonderful Wizard is very different from the Oz we get by the time we get to Emerald City of Oz. It's borderline utopian here, and as we get closer to it, it becomes more and more utopian. You see some of the few instances of money, some of the few instances of death. Let's see. One of the things that's interestingly brought up is that the witches, Dorothy, wears the blue and white gingham dress. That's one of the few real descriptions we get of her. And blue, the Munchkins love this because blue is the favorite color of the Munchkins. White is the favorite color of witches, so that means she must be a good witch. But interestingly, there's never seemingly an illustration of the Wicked Witch of the West that shows her wearing white. And I think the women, that comes up with the suffragette movement. Baum was a feminist. His mother-in-law was the right-hand woman to Susan B. Anthony and Katie Stanton. And the women in white were the women who were for the suffragette movement. Which is why Glinda, always appears in white and is always... Glinda is the ideal. Glinda's a fascinating character. So, as we all know, Dorothy goes along, she meets the Scarecrow, and Baum is big on irony. Particularly in this book, he's big on puns, too. Real big on puns. The Scarecrow has two fears, being a fool and fire. However, if he's afraid of fire, he can't be too foolish. And if he's aware enough to be afraid of being a fool, that's fairly self-aware. Again, the irony, he's a scarecrow who can't scarecrows. He's unable to fulfill his purpose, and that's his real desire, brains to do his job correctly. Baum was very pro-education and self-sufficiency. I mean, Baum himself was fairly self-sufficient. So you get a lot of the ideals of what Baum wants, and again, what America wants. I mean, America is, especially at that time, was all about the American dream and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and going out and making a name for yourself and making your fortune, because it was America and you could do anything. And the Scarecrow pulls himself up from the ground and eventually becomes, temporarily, the King of Oz. The Tin Woodman, as we all know, Tin Woodman has a superhero-style backstory. He was in love with a woman whose mother was not okay with the match, goes to the Witch of the East, gets the Witch of the East to enchant his axe. He's chops off all his body parts. He's turned into tin, but doesn't have a heart anymore. And that's what he wants. He wants a heart to be able to love, but he's clearly the most compassionate character in the book. Physically, he's perfect, but he's missing a heart. The Baum is big on turning the allegories of attractive versus good, attractive versus evil. And I believe it's Queen Syzyx of Ix, and I may have pronounced that incorrectly. She's beautiful, but evil. Later, when we get to the witch's castle, he describes her castle as having many beautiful rooms. There's no physical description of the witch. Dinslow drew her as a crone. We all think of Margaret Hamilton with the green skin. But Baum never says that. Beauty isn't necessarily good. Of course, Glinda is the most beautiful because she's a stand-in for Maud. We all know it. Which is great. She's beautiful. And she is good, but good and beauty don't necessarily mean the same thing. Let's see. So, we meet then the lion. And the lion is, again, a lion who cannot do his job, which is be brave. But we'll see throughout the course of the entire book, prior to them getting their tchotchkes from the wizard, that he is brave. He's perfectly brave. And it's all about believing in yourself. And then you have Dorothy, who's got the brain, she's got the heart, she's got the courage. She just needs the way home. So she has everything, but she still needs something. And as we go along this journey to the Emerald City, we see more of this. It's quite literally almost every turn. You're seeing Scarecrow solve a problem, Tin Man feeling crying, or showing that he does care. The lion not really being afraid, but still doing something, like jumping them all over a gigantic canyon, helping them escape the Kaleidas. You get that as you go along. So of course you've got the poppy field, which is a great diversion. You do get, after the poppy field sequence, one of the few animal deaths in Oz. Obviously we presume the Kaleidas are dead. And it never really happens after Wizard. In fact, I don't believe it happens after Wizard at all. And that's when the Tin Woodman chops the head off of the wildcat that's chasing the Queen of the Field Mice. And she's a queen. She's important. And Baum makes very clear that even the smallest things are important, particularly in Oz. Let's see. Skip ahead. Boop. And in fact, the lion comments, "I have always thought myself very big and terrible, yet such small things as flowers came near to killing me, and such small animals as mice have saved my life. How strange it is." You know, in Oz, you don't take anything for granted. It's this utopian thing. And I've always loved this picture spread of Dorothy trying to get them food, and they're all just peering over the fence like, hey. Let's see. Sorry about that. Had to pause so that the dog needed out. We have a new puppy, and yes, she's a good girl. Interestingly, and or not interestingly, I did do a little bit of math, so fun little bit here, trying to figure out just how long it takes to reach, or just how far Emerald City is from where Dorothy's house fell. It takes 7.5 days to reach Emerald City by foot. The average human walks about 3 miles an hour, so I'm guessing that a small child like Dorothy probably goes about 2 miles an hour. I took out half a day for the loss with the poppy field and the river, so that's about 7 days' time. And they probably walked roughly 13 hours a day. So, figuring that in, Emerald City is about 191 miles. So, that's a really long way to walk. Let's see. So, we're obviously now to Emerald City. And this is one of the more inconsistent elements of Oz. The Guardian of the Gates forces them to put on green glasses because the brilliance of the city will blind them. The Wizard later says that there is no more emerald. I mean, it's no more green than any other city. And that's why they wear the green glasses as part of the illusion. So, you know, the city is green, but then as time goes on, especially midway through land, the green glasses just disappear and never return, and the Emerald City is made entirely of actual emeralds. One of the just little inconsistencies. Baum was never overly concerned with keeping things consistent, as you'll sort of see as we go along. This is also the only time in Emerald City that you see a class system. There's an inclusion of some posh people that hang around the palace. So it's rare that you get this in Oz, but you do get it. The quid pro quo thing doesn't stick around either. There's the balance of power is very off kilter. The wizard has it all, but actually has no power, as we all know. The assumed power that Dorothy has is all because of her accidental murder. there's no... Oz is very, very backwards at this point. It's, to a degree, it's a bit broken. Not to read that much into it, but it's a little broken. So, of course, the wizard sends them off to the country of the Winkies to find the Wicked Witch of the West. And this is where, again, you get that whole, does beauty mean good, does beauty mean evil thing. And there's obviously no real answer. In fact, we don't ever even get a color picture of the Wicked Witch, which I think is interesting. We get a handful of pictures. There she is. No indication of her skin color, although everyone probably does assume that it's green. We get the irony here that the witch, she's afraid of dark, she's afraid of water, she's a bully, but she can't really do any real damage to Dorothy, partially because she is protected, but partially because she's just not able to. So Dorothy, of course, does eventually melt the witch with water, as we all know. And she melts away like brown sugar. It is described that she has no blood, which is probably why she's able to be destroyed, and her sister, so easily. There's nothing really holding them together, and Baum makes this very clear distinction that the Witch of the East dries up in the sun, the Witch of the West melts away like sugar. And in fact, Dorothy sweeps the remains out the door. So you've got these two women who have all this magic power, but no real substance. Whereas Dorothy, Glinda, they have substance. The wizard, complex character, but has some substance. And then we're into the return. And this is actually the first time in the entire trip that Dorothy gets discouraged at all about will she get home. And so you get 14 chapters before our heroine has any sort of wavering moment. But she, of course, obviously doesn't. She recovers very quickly. While we're on the flight back from the land of the West with the flying monkeys, or the winged monkeys, excuse me, they tell their story of how they're imprisoned. And Baum throws in these little mini fairy tale sort of moments here and there. And we're told about a sorceress in the north, whose name is Gaylette, who lives in a ruby palace. And I've seen some postulation from people I consider quite credible, that it could be Glinda with a different name. It was put forth by my friend Sarah and her friend Nick. And because she creates the golden cap. And it's certainly possible that maybe in an early draft, that's what she was. Kind of a little side notey thing there. Upon their return, they discover the wizard is a fake. He rewards them, of course, with the tchotchkes. And you see a lot, I think, in the wizard. I think you see a lot of Baum himself, because he does have the whole vaudevillian aspect. You get a lot of his theater background. You get a lot of the background that he just wants to be successful. And Baum did want to be successful. You get the first creation story of the Emerald City, which is that the wizard arrives and has them build it. This story is never referred to again. Let's see. the wizard does give them their tchotchkes, and Dorothy actually seems relatively displeased with her friends over this. She just seems, and it's more her tone, because she does say that she likes him just the way he is. But she also is at least aware that they feel like they need this. This is something they need for them to feel whole. And I think that's a very human thing. We all have certain things that we're needing. For some people, it's having a college degree and having that diploma. For some people, it's, you know, we all have things that we feel like we need to make us who feel that we're who we are, and to feel comfortable in who we are. And those are all very human emotions coming from very non-human creatures. Again, the lovely irony that Baum likes to introduce. And, of course, the wizard tries to take Dorothy home in a balloon, and isn't able to, because the wizard's balloon leaves her. Train of thought slipped, excuse me. So at this point, most people think the story's over, because the wizard has left in the balloon, Dorothy's left. Now it's time to just click those heels and get back home. And yet, we start a third story arc, and this is the thing that most people who are unfamiliar with the book don't know, is there's a whole, we're only on good old page 211 of a 260-page book. So there's still 50 more pages to go. We get a really fun illustration. On page 216. You get it several times when the golden cap gets used. I love this illustration sequence here. There's a lot of Dinslow's art that is pretty fantastic. It's still not my favorite version. We'll get to that some other time. But his art is very good and very lively in places. So they decide that they can go see Glinda, who lives in the south part of Oz. And so they set off. Their first encounter a forest of fighting trees. Then they visit the dainty China country. Then the lion becomes king of beasts, and we get another animal death. But this time it's a monster that's essentially a giant spider. So it's okay. Then they come to the Hill of the Hammerheads. And the winged monkeys make their last appearance forever, as far as I know. And they arrive at Glinda's palace. This is about day 59. So Dorothy's gone about 2 months. Glinda reveals the power of the shoes. Dorothy uses them to go home. Along the way, they are lost forever. Canonically, they never return. They're occasionally mentioned. It's brought up in Ozma of Oz that they're gone forever because you can't bring magic into our world. That magic can only exist in Oz. And then Dorothy's home. The end. So you have this whole epic story. Elements of it are draggy. There are chapters that really are nothing more than just filler chapters. There's not really much need for this third arc, which is why it's 99.9% of the time cut. And yet you have a pretty fully realized world that doesn't change a whole lot. It does change, don't get me wrong, It's also one of, and it's when I rank the books, I can't put Wizard in there because Wizard is kind of the gateway. Wizard went on to make Baum a lot of money and a lot of heartache. It set in motion a book series that he would continue writing until his death and would succeed him for another 20 years, very successfully. As we all know, there's the 1939 adaptation, which is my favorite movie still. But there's so many other ones that are out there. There's The Wiz, which the movie's not great, but it's still enjoyable. The live version was better. There have been animated series, the Sinar series, which very faithfully gets you through Wizard. It even includes the Dainty China Country and the Hammerheads and the Fighting Tree. Well, Fighting Tree, singular. So Oz is everywhere. So that's kind of the Wonderful Wizard of Oz in a nutshell. It takes great pains to avoid all of the tropes of the traditional fairy tale. The witches are obviously evil, or the Wicked Witch is obviously evil, but she's afraid of water. That removes a lot of, and she's afraid of the dark. That takes fears that children have, puts them on the bad guy, and then they're able to go, oh, well, she's just like me. She's not scary. So the parable on populism, I'm not one to buy into it. For me, the story is truly about being an American fairy tale with American ideals that are very, very prevalent, especially with Dorothy, especially with the go out and make something of yourself. You can do anything. You can get through anything. And this carries through, to a degree, through the rest of the series. So, there we kind of go. So there we go. That's kind of it for me for now. So tonight, obviously, Wonderful Wizard. We will go over the Land of Oz, probably tomorrow night. And then hopefully I will have a blog up before the end of the week. So, there we go. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to comment. Thank you to everyone who has hung around for 8. I have finished TikTok of Oz. I actually finished it last night. So once I get Wizard and Land redone, we'll be doing TikTok of Oz. So there's going to be a whole lot of videos from me. Don't be surprised. But I will talk to you all later.